Hello everyone. So this week I am doing things a little differently with the cameras, and I didn't have any AA batteries for the microphone I wear. So I need you to tell me if this sounds okay or if I have to go steal some batteries from something. So I'm going to give it a second here to get your feedback before I proceed. Hamada, you were so close to first. Bill beat you. Bill was waiting. He was like trigger finger ready to go. Hi, Tammy. So I need to find out. Let me see what you guys say. The a lot of hellos. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Neil. Hi, Nano Joe. Aquapuncture. ATV. ATV was upset that they weren't first. Hi, Firefox. Look at that. You're even a fox in your avatar. Sound was okay, but not as good as I thought. All right. Let me try something. Just give me a second. I have an option. Okay, we're going to switch. I think this one was almost dead too. Let's just see what happens here. Do this the old-fashioned way. Get wired up on camera. That's not how you're supposed to do it. This whole week has been a whirlwind, and I never got a chance to go buy fresh batteries. All right, so we'll start this, do this, do this. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. We have a green light for now. If that thing goes bad, or if you guys notice we've lost audio, let me know. I've got a few batteries I grabbed from something else. So we'll see what happens. You probably noticed that there's something right there. I had to see where it was on the camera. So that is my Peacemaker. And there's a little tiny fish in there. And I was sharing it with others through social media, but barely. I actually have a video planned to, I'm looking at the wrong camera. I have a video planned to explain everything. And I don't really want to talk about it, but I do. So maybe I'll talk about it, and then the edited video will be the more condensed version. How about that? And then yesterday, when I thought I would get things wrapped up to release videos that could go up on the channel, I had a migraine from the minute I got up until I went to sleep. And thank goodness when I woke up, I was migraine free. So I was really happy about that. But this little guy, that's right here, I had to check where the M is on my shirt. When he appears, this is a Centropage interruptus. I have wanted this fish probably for 17 years. I think the first time I saw it was 2003, and I have been wanting it and could not get my hands on it because, you know, it's too expensive, it was impossible to get. And a week ago, someone I know, who is a famous breeder, posted a video on her page on Facebook saying, I have 2 of these for sale. And I was super excited, but I was also concerned because the post was a whole hour old. And I thought, it's gone. I mean, there's no way. I missed it. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. So this was captive bred, tank raised from egg and sperm, from fertilized eggs, from the parent fish that she had in her possession. So they weren't taken from the ocean. This fish literally was bred in captivity and is 9 months old now. And I was very excited to get a Karen Britain tank-raised fish. And I'm not even sure if I've got the right definition. I actually have to talk with like Matt Peterson, make sure I'm saying it right. But I think tank-raised, captive bred means it all happened in an aquarium. And that's my main point. So that was really important to me. Secondarily, I really, really wanted this fish. And I never, ever believed that I could afford it. And technically, I shouldn't have bought it. But I bought it. I'm credit card, done. So this fish, in case you're just curious, it's $2,000. It's very, very expensive. So it arrived in a huge bag of water, which will be in the video. The video should be entertaining. I hope you like it. But it came in a giant bag of water. and the fish is like this big. I mean, it is maybe an inch in size. I doubt it's more than an inch. It's just a little tiny adorable thing. So Eric from Among the Reef is the one that handled the whole transaction and did the shipping. He's the one that received it. It was shipped from Hawaii to California, to Los Angeles area, and then from there went straight to my door. So he went to Los Angeles and spent a day in a brand new tank with brand new water, and then it went from the breeder to brand new water to my reef. So I didn't have to put it through any kind of medicines to kill off any parasites because there wasn't any to get. The whole transition was clean, so I put it inside the Peacemaker. However, I'm on the phone with Eric, describing my experience, and he says, "Are you sure you don't want to set up a small tank with a piece of live rock from your reef and put it in there and let it grow a little bit before you put it in your 400-gallon?" I was like, absolutely not. I want it to be in the 400-gallon. I want to see it swimming around in my background on my YouTube videos. I want to see it every day, just going everywhere. But then that stuck in my head, and I started to really second guess. Was I being stubborn? Was I being risky? Is this a big mistake? And so I put it in the Peacemaker over here. And that way it's part of the ecosystem. Also, I lowered the temperature of my tank to match what this fish needs closely. So a lot of changes have happened. But then once it was safely out of a bucket and into a filtered system, then I thought, I'm going to Frank's. I'm going to see if I can get myself a tank, like now. And if Frank couldn't get me one, I'd go to Petco. And if Petco didn't have one, I'd go to PetSmart. I was going to get a tank that, within 24 hours. So I told Frank when I walked in, I'm a customer, I demand service, and I said, I'm walking in, I want to buy a tank, I want to get one today, you have nothing in here, how do you sell a tank? Because I have no idea. I don't run a fish store. I've never wanted to be in that part of the business. And so I'm, in the old days, Frank had a store full of aquariums you could buy. And you'd buy the tank stand canopy, you get lights, you get salt, you get test kits, and you would leave. And then when everything was established and good, you'd come back and start getting livestock. But he stopped doing that. Now you go in and you tell him what you want, and the next day or within a week or whatever, you'll get the tank you've ordered. And so I said, I want a tank. I want it tomorrow. What do you got? And he says, well, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know, something cubish. Maybe a 20-gallon cube. Is there such a thing? 30-gallon cube seems kind of big, but okay, So he showed me something from Marineland that he could get me immediately. And that is what you might have seen on my Instagram when I showed the picture of using Live Rock Enhance with a brand new tank. And so that tank has been set up, and there will be a Reef diary about it. The tank showed up the next day. I went ahead and I bought the tank in the stand. I didn't even get a top for it. I thought I did, but I didn't. So you could get a top, a glass top, probably with a silicone hinge part. And I thought I said, yeah, go ahead, but apparently that's not the words that came out of my mouth, because he says, you said no, never mind, you'll make your own. So I'm going to make my own polycarbonate lid. And then and I said I needed a bag of live sand, which the live sand showed up the same day. So I put in a bag of Carib Seas live sand as well. And then I got on the internet and I looked up Gulf Live Rock, who's out of Florida. And I said to them, I need some live rock and I need it tomorrow. What do you have that you could put in a box today and ship today that I'll have tomorrow? And he says, I've got these. And he sent me a picture. I said, I love it. Send me the rock. And the rock arrived yesterday during my migraine. And so it sat, on the walkboard behind me for a few hours while I tried to feel better. And then finally I was like, I'm not feeling better. I just have to deal with this. I got to get that rock underwater. So I went ahead and I took water from the reef. I took water from my brand new poly tank, the one that had 80 gallons of water in it. And I did half reef, half brand new water. I put in the new sand, and I'll show you how I do that. I put in the water from the reef and then the new water. I didn't disturb the sand. The tank was relatively clear. I put in my new rock, which is covered in stuff, including what appears to be 2 clams. We'll see if the clams live. I don't know, but really neat. There was Halimeda, which is called a money plant. It's this weird green algae that looks like little wafers, and that's on there, so I'm really happy about that. And there was some kind of reddish something. I don't know if it's a giant blob of Valonia or if it's some kind of a coral. I don't know what it is. It's like a giant red tumor, and that thing is in there. So there's some stuff in there which I like. I wanted live rock covered in critters and bugs and worms and whatever comes out of the ocean. I'm very happy with that. So that is what's in the tank right now. And then today I tested for ammonia. And there's a little bit, but not much. Not too bad. It seemed to be less than 1 ppm. And last night I put in Live Rock Enhanced. So I want to talk about Live Rock Enhanced for a couple minutes because some people ask questions. Live Rock Enhance is this stuff right here. It comes in a jar. I sell it on my website. It's $20 a jar. It treats up to 2,000 gallons of water. And inside here is usually, because I changed what I did, usually there's a bag in here like, like a little tiny Ziploc full of powder. So this is the powder. And then you put in 1 scoop per 25 gallons. And I talked with Tulio yesterday. He saw my post on Facebook about the new Live Rock I got. And he says, Mark, throw a tablespoon in that tank right now. And I was like, man, a tablespoon, that's a lot. That's like for 100 gallons. And, oh, by the way, I didn't say the size of the new tank. It's 27. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to put in a tablespoon. I put in like 2/3 of a tablespoon. I just dropped it in there and the tank got cloudy, which I expected. And usually that dissipates in a few hours. And then today it's still cloudy. I'm like, oh. So I called him up again. I was like, so I'm just bringing it to your attention. Because, sometimes it's nice to be able to talk to the people that made the product and just kind of confirm that things are on track, that things are normal. And believe it or not, he said, if the tank is still cloudy, that's a good thing. And I'm like, okay. So I said, explain that to me. And I said, because people are asking me questions about Live Rock Enhance and how will it benefit their system? What does it do? And I never really want to talk about it because I don't know that I understand it enough to explain it properly. And if I, say something wrong, it affects the company's product line. I don't want to hurt their business either. So basically, Live Rock Enhance has an aggressive bacteria that eats waste. I knew that. And it can be used to set up a brand new tank. It can be used for brand new dry rock to get it established with some new bacteria. It can be used on live rock that you're quote unquote cooking, where you're trying to get rid of all the stuff off of it and you just want to get the rock nice and clean. And over a period of weeks and months, as it's sitting in a barrel or a bin or something that's covered, and you have it circulating salt water, adding Live Rock Enhance all the time, I say all the time, a couple times a week, will make that rock look so much cleaner. It's crazy. And the first time I used it for like a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and I didn't really pay attention. I just did it because I was told to do it because I'm friends with Tulio and I trust him. And there was someone else on Facebook that posted a picture of their tank and said, holy crap, Tulio, my tank looks completely different. And I was like, huh, I should go look at my tank. And so I got up from the computer and I went and looked at my Reef and I looked at my rock, and it was so clean. The rock looked clean. It didn't look bleached or anything like that. It looked clean, like live rock should look. And there was no nuisance crap on it. The rock was clean. And wherever there was some coralline, the coralline could spread because there was no competition. Then I went to the frag tank, and all that, the rock in there had turned purple and looked really good. And I was like, how did I not even notice this under my nose? It's crazy, right? But because he pointed it out, I was like, he's right. It totally made a difference. And then I started going back in my older pictures to find a before, because I really wanted to show you guys a before and an after picture. And all I had was a video of me putting it in, and you couldn't really see the rock, which means I blew it, right? So anyway, if you ever try this yourself, what I would suggest you do is take some good close-up pictures of your rock, put this in there each, as the recipe says, 3 times the first week, twice a week for the next 3, 4, 6 weeks, whatever. And then take a picture of your rock and compare them side by side, and you will see the difference. I had people that visited me, like Wes, my buddy from Keller here in Texas. Dwayne was happened to be in this area at one point, also around the time I had done this. And they were both like, man, your rock looks so clean. I was like, I know, this stuff's really neat. And I didn't really understand. I don't know how it works. So I apologize that I can't give you the nitty gritty. I could give you Tulio's phone number. I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate that. But no, seriously, the descriptions are on websites. You can read about it. But it can be used for new rock, for brand new cycle, tanks that are cycling, the whole shebang. So if you want to try it out, you can. The other product he sells looks identical, jar-wise. This one's Live Rock Enhance. This one is Reef Enhance. So Reef Enhance is actually how you grow pods in your tank. There aren't pods in here that I know of. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe there is. But you add this. It's a micro plankton-sized food, very, very fine food. And there's a lot of foods. People like to use reefroids. I talk about Benepets a lot, you know, the Benereef. And Reef Enhance is also in my new tank. So I put this in yesterday, and then I put this in today to feed those clams and those bugs and those worms and stuff. And one thing I did not know, and I don't know. If I say this wrong, I'm sorry, Tulio, but I could have sworn he said there's even microscopic phytoplankton in this stuff, right? But the way these two work with each other, the microplankton, I think is what he said, will actually crack open the shell around the phytoplankton cell. So if you didn't know, phytoplankton is green water. And phytoplankton's in the oceans. It's really important. It actually adds to the oxygen levels in the ocean. And as it's been depleted, that's been a big concern to scientists. People buy phytoplankton, or they grow their own, that they pour into their tank to create food. However, certain things uptake it and certain things can't. And years ago, Eric Borneman talked about how he cracked open an acropora, got into the digestive tract, and wanted to see what it had eaten. And he found phytoplankton inside the acropora coral. However, it couldn't eat it. It would inhale it through its polyps, take it into its gut, couldn't break it down, and would eject it back out. He also found phytoplankton cells in the protein skimmer's skimmate, in the waste, and those cells were still intact. So consider that the shell around the phytoplankton is just so hard, so dense, certain things cannot crush through it to get in. The Reef Enhance will help, I think he said the Reef Enhance, will help to crack that open so that the animal can get the phyto out of the bubble. So, God, I hope I said that right. Like I said, if I know a topic, I can talk about it. When I don't know enough, I don't really talk about it much because I feel like I'm just going to say something wrong, and I don't want to do that. Now, I do know this. You can use this forever. It's not like a start a brand new tank situation, or your tank is 8 years old and you better not use it. No, you can use it. I used it in my tank for the first time when my Reef was about 7 years old, and I used it for a while, and then I stopped just for whatever reason, just forgot about it, I guess. You know, I used up the jar, didn't pull a new jar off the shelf. But I remember him saying, you can use this forever, Mark, and you'll always have nice looking rock. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then the Reef Enhance, he said, Mark, if you like pods, put this in your tank, you will have 1 billion pods. So I think, because we know if you have like copepods and amphipods and so forth, and you're adding phytoplankton to the system, that the pods will continue to flourish. Well, adding this stuff in there, it kind of like supercharges it and allows those pods to really grow in abundance. And that way, hopefully, when you look in your refugium, you'll see it teeming with pods, because that is an area with no competition. There's nothing to prey on them and consume them. Versus, you know, pods in your reef, you might not see very many because you have wrasses that eat them, you have mandarins that eat them, and then even corals can capture them if they get too close to their mouths. So I want to just kind of give you I feel like I didn't give you nearly enough information, but it's not some BS product is all I'm trying to say. All right. Yeah, I'd actually love to just have him on. He was busy. I was thinking, oh, why don't you just come on the stream today? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong camera again. Why don't you come on the stream today and just talk? Look, there's the fish. So I've been looking at it a lot, and when this tank is ready, this little tiny fish here is going to end up in that tank right there next to me that you haven't seen on camera yet. But the video will come out over this weekend, and I will share some stuff with you so you can see it all. The plan is, why do I have the secondary tank besides the fact that Eric said, are you sure you don't want to do that? I have talked about this in the past. Caitlin, who I lost last year, really wanted her own tank. And I thought one nice way to honor her would be to give her own tank, to set up a tank with the things she loved in it. So I was already going to do a tank anyway. I just wanted to wait till I'd replace the carpets in the house, because that way I could put it there and it's not in the way. But because of my new purchase, it kind of accelerated this plan a little bit. So I bought her tank and her stand, which, I explained earlier, and this is going to be hers. And inside that tank will be the things she loved. She'll have her Randall goby, I think that's right. Randall goby with a pistol shrimp. There will be some zoanthids, and she liked the hard LPS corals like frog spawn or hammer. And so I'm thinking of taking some of that. I was thinking Recordia and zoanthids. She really liked a simple tank where all you do is clean the glass and vacuum the sand bed, and no sump, no skimmer, no dosing, none of that stuff, just water changes. So that's what this tank will be. This tank will be a very simple tank. It's actually an undrilled marine land tank that is sitting on a stand, and it will have a little controller on it, and it's going to have an auto top off. But I'm going to keep the bioload light enough that it doesn't need a bunch of stuff, and water changes will be what it's going to get. So we'll see what it turns into, but I'm looking forward to making something pretty. Odds are I'll even put in some kind of crazy, some kind of macroalgae as well, because she would have done that. That's her style. And the new pygmy, the Japanese pygmy angelfish will go in there. It'll be beautiful. And then when it gets larger and it finally gets to move into the reef, then I'm going to get her lemon peel angelfish, and that's going to go in there from then on. So that's the future of this tank. It's just going to be simple and pretty and colorful with things that move, and you'll get to see it. It'll be shared on social media. So you'll see it through the YouTube channel, you'll see it through Instagram, you'll see it on Facebook, and that will be her little tank. So, and it kind of comes at a good time because tomorrow would have been her birthday. So it's like a birthday gift to her. And yeah, I think it's nice. So for right now, it's just a cloudy tank. It's going to have to cycle for a while. And then once it's... okay, I want to talk about the cloudy tank thing because I kind of glossed over it and didn't explain. You put in the product, the water gets cloudy, and then usually it dissipates in a few hours. Now, maybe it dissipates because of the filtration. Since this tank has no filtration on it at this time, there's nothing to capture and absorb and remove the cloud. But here was the interesting thing. Remember I said before, Tilda said, that's a good thing. And I thought, okay, you know, because I'm kind of thinking, no, I like clear water. And he said, Mark, when this thing is ready, when that water's clear, it's ready for livestock. Because what's moving around the water column is bacteria and microfood for all those things that you got on your new live rock. This is fantastic. He was super excited. And he said, just let it do its thing. There's no rush, which I agree. I mean, I kind of want something faster because, you know, this little fish, I'd like to put in a little bit bigger biotope than this peacemaker with some feather caulerpa. But I'm feeding that fish 3-4 times a day, and I'm using arctopods from Reef Nutrition. That seems to be the one food it likes the most. I tried some pellet food from Reef Nutrition that's very small, designed for small fish, and it just picked at them and left it on the bottom of the box. And I was like, okay, that didn't work. And I've squirted in some other food, like the Rod's food mixed with the mini mysis, mixed with PE mysis, mixed with brine shrimp covered in spirulina. Didn't seem to care much about that one either. So I'm like, all right, well, at least I know arctopods is guaranteed. So I'm doing that for now. And I am putting the other stuff also, hoping to wean the fish onto choices. So it won't just be reliant on one thing in case there's ever a shortage and I can't get it. But that's kind of where we're at on this stuff. So the tank right now is cloudy. I did add an air stone. There's no fish in there. So the fact that it's cloudy, the fact that the oxygen level may have dropped, doesn't affect anything because there's no fish. If there was fish in there, respiration could be a thing. And I just want to clarify this because someone would say, well, then how do I put this in a reef tank? You can totally put it in a reef tank. Matter of fact, when you put it in, you're supposed to turn off your skimmer for, you know, like a couple of hours and turn off your UV as well because you don't want to kill the brand new bacteria you're putting in the tank, just like you do with any other product. But then you turn it back on, filtration kicks over, the water looks clear again, and you move on with your life. But if you're trying to start a brand new tank with live rock that may have some decay and some die-off on it, you can go ahead and you can overdose the live rock enhance on there to really kickstart things and get things going. And that's what I'm doing. And then I did choose today, looking at the water, to add an air pump with an air stone, and that's in there bubbling to add some air. And he said, that's fine. That's no problem at all. So that's what I'm doing. So now you're kind of up to date on what's happening there. I think I'm going to keep this little box right here next to me so you can see this little guy. But, because he costs so much money. Okay, so you'd say, why would you spend so much money on a fish? I'm sure one person's thinking that. I saw it for the first time, like I said, early 2000s, and I thought it's so beautiful. And it apparently is very rare. It's very rare for anyone to catch it. Now, there's other fish out there that are rare that cost way more. The peppermint angelfish, which I think is so beautiful. And all it is red and white stripes. But it's just so pretty. $25,000 for that fish. I will never be able to, okay, I already said that about this one. I will never be able to afford that kind of fish. Well, I never will buy a $25,000 fish. That's crazy money. That is for the rich of the rich, or that's for public aquariums who maybe don't have to pay that kind of money because they're a public aquarium. I don't know. Or maybe they do. Maybe they have to pay it because they're getting ticket prices to bring people through the door. I have no idea. But that's a lot of money. And if it were to die, I'd be out 25 grand and have nothing to show for it. I'd lose my mind. Just like, I'm already kind of sweating the 2,000, but I work for a living. I make money. I really don't do anything for. Matter of fact, I called up my best friend and I told her, I said, hey, I bought this fish. And she was like, okay. And I'm waiting for her to judge me, you know. And she said, I'm not going to say anything. I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. And she said, Mark Levinson never buys himself anything. It's always goes towards business, goes toward his home, whatever. You never buy anything for yourself just to get. So you buying this fish for yourself, I'm happy for you. And that's the end of it. I'm like, okay, I like that. That helps ease my conscience a little tiny bit. But yeah. So yeah, I really don't do much of anything. I'm pretty boring. I'm just a coral guy, you know. But this little guy makes me so happy. It's so pretty. It's so colorful. And it gets larger. It's actually the largest of the dwarf angelfish. Even though it's called a pygmy, it grows to be 6 inches in length. So we'll see how large it truly becomes in my care. But I'm hoping to get 5, 6, 7 years out of this fish. I really hope so. And we'll see. We'll just see everything. And we'll see what happens. I would love to have her in, and it's a girl. They turn to a boy later on in life. So I'd love to have her in the small tank now where I can enjoy her and see her swimming around. There's only a little bit of live rock. Again, that's something Caitlin would do. She wouldn't have filled it up with rock. She wouldn't have packed it full of coral. She didn't want that. She was really a fish girl. And so having a few fish in there is ideal. And I'm going to put some fun things in there as well. I'm thinking maybe add a Helfriki, the purple one. It's such a beautiful firefish. And that was one she loved a lot. Remember the one that she named the F word? We need one of those in there, I think. And I'm going to put the walking dendro in there because there's no competition for it. And I don't think that the pygmy angelfish would show any interest in it. And, you know, so it's going to be a pretty little tank. It's just going to take some time till it's all established. Let's see. And then update-wise for the building, I'm just waiting for the electrical to be hooked up. So next Tuesday, I'm meeting with someone to discuss what's the best approach. And then after that, I will move forward and get power on the building. And once power's on the building, air conditioner goes on the building. Once air conditioner's on the building, internet goes on the building. And then I can start actually building the workstations because I don't feel like doing it in this heat. I'd much rather have the door shut, the AC running, and I'm building these tables and painting them and getting everything ready. And then the shelves have to go up and all the product has to move out there. So it's happening. It's just not quite today. Just got to wait a little bit longer. I just want to let you know that if you have questions, make sure you do @MeLovesReef in your questions so I can see it. But I'm going to go through the list. I saw a lot of people saying hello and the audio's working and you like it better with a microphone. So that's good. I will definitely buy more batteries this week. Let's see. I'm looking for the first little. Yeah, I figured, you know, okay, doesn't matter. Let's see. Yeah, the fish's color is really good. It's just beautiful. And someone, you know, a couple people said, oh, that's a coral beauty. I'm like, no. I have a coral beauty. There's one in the reef already. But this thing, it has like little dots on its face. And when I share the video, I'm going to include 3 pictures that were given to me by Kevin Cohen and Felicia McCauley. They have some really nice photographs of that fish, so you can really appreciate it for what it is. And I took some pictures too, but I took pictures of a little tiny juvenile. I mean, it's 9 months old. It's a baby. I'm still doing it in months. I should be doing it in weeks. It's 84 weeks old. You know, it was funny. ATV says, 2,000, that's my whole fish budget. I was going to say, for some people, the price of that fish is their entire aquarium budget. You know, the whole system was set up. Let's see. No, it wasn't in a holding tank. When I talked with Eric about this, he specifically said, I am setting up a 10-gallon tank that's brand new, hasn't had a drop of water, and I'm putting brand new salt water in there, and the fish is acclimated to that, and I make sure it's okay before it ships to you. Alex says, which product do you think is better, the Trident or the Alcatronic? Well, the Alcatronic measures alkalinity, and the tests that you can do with the Alcatronic are cheaper per test, and you can do like a zillion of them, where the Trident does them every 6 hours, and the cost per test costs more, but you will also get a calcium and a magnesium level. So you have to kind of compare those to each other. You're going to have the Apex to run the Trident, and it has to be the newer Apex. It can't be Apex Classic. The Alcatronic, I don't know what you have to plug that into. I know that Devin has one, and I kind of feel like he's almost the authority on it, so you might want to reach out to him on Reef Dudes and get some feedback from him. I do know my friend Mike, who's a moderator in Club Milo's Reef, he created his own alkalinity tester like a mad scientist. I mean, he's using like 3 or 6 dosing pumps to do this thing, and he's mixing up elixirs, and I mean he can test alkalinity 1,000 times a day and track the data in his Apex. He really created this phenomenal over-the-top system, and I'm halfway tempted to copy him one day, but I have the Trident, so I don't need to. But it's still kind of neat what he did, and he showed a video of it, and it's crazy. Adam says, I just got the baby Regal Angel from Biota this week. I'm looking forward to seeing the growth on your interruptus. Me too. Look, there it is. There it is. Firefox says, I have a quick question for you. I've been fighting hair algae for the last few months. What can I do to combat this? Hair algae is just one of those things that happens in our tanks, and usually it's fueled off of light, nitrate, and phosphate. And specifically, I feel phosphate mostly. So if you can lower the phosphate level in your tank, it will weaken the algae, okay? So we're not trying to bottom out your nutrient level to where you end up with dinoflagellates and all kinds of issues. We just want to weaken the hair algae. I have a video on this channel that talks about how to get rid of green hair algae. But in a nutshell, I use Phosphate RX, I dose the tank, and it sucks out all the phosphate out of the water basically in a matter of hours. And then 3 days later, the algae is barely holding onto the rock, and you can reach in with your hand and you can pinch it, and it just pulls right off. And you put your hand in a bowl of clean water, and you rinse your fingers off, and you put your hand in the tank and you pinch it again, and you do this pinching thing, and you keep rinsing your fingers so you don't spread it. If you're brushing it off, it's landing elsewhere. If you are blasting off with a power head, it's landing somewhere else. If it's blowing around the tank and trying to catch it with a net, I feel like that's the wrong approach. Pinch, rinse out of the tank, put a clean hand in the tank, and do this. And do it over and over and over until you can't stand it. If it takes you 20 minutes and you're like, okay, I can't do another minute, fine. Tomorrow, do another 20 minutes, and the third day, do another 20 minutes. But rip out as much as you can manually. And the smaller the tank, the easier this task is going to be. And then what you can't reach, that's okay. When you're finally to the point where it's just little bits and it's really short on the rock, that's when you add your cleanup crew and you add a bunch of hungry hermit crabs and snails, and you set them loose in there, and they will devour what's left. And if you do those 3 things, kill the phosphate, pinch it out, and add the cleanup crew, you will end up with a tank that doesn't have a hair algae problem. And by the way, Firefox, I do want to say this. I've said this in the past. When people say, I have this horrible algae problem in my tank, and I tell them, for $300, I can solve it. And they're like, done. That's what I'm telling you to do. Spend some money. You're going to buy the Phosphate RX, and you're going to buy the cleanup crew. And it might seem expensive. But you might say, oh, I can't afford more than 3 snails. That's a terrible decision. You need to get the right amount of critters in there to devour the algae. And if you're just putting in a few things, it's like putting a few cows in the field and expecting the entire field to be nice and mowed down, chewed down, right? But if you have an entire herd of cows out there, the growth is really controlled. So Eric Borneman years ago had a talk, and The name of the talk was, do you have enough cows in your tank? And I thought it was pretty funny. So yeah, you want a bunch of and you want brand new ones that are starving. When you go to the fish store to buy your cleanup crew, you'll notice their shells are clean because all these snails are in one tank, all these hermit crabs in another tank, all these emerald crabs in another tank, all these shrimp are in another tank. They're all separated, and those tanks usually tend to be really clean, right? Because the cleanup crew is not only cleaning that tank, it's cleaning stuff off their shells and off their backs to make sure they're all pristine. That's why they look so clean. They have no food source. So they're showing up hungry, and they hit your tank, and there's food everywhere, and they start chewing it up. But if you already have snails, you're like, well, I already have them. They're not doing anything. It's like, that's the problem. Those guys are full. They're fat. They're used to waiting for the pellet food to drop to the sand bed. They don't care. They're not hungry. So you want hungry, brand new cleanup crew. And if it costs you 100, 200, 300, but you get rid of the hair algae problem, wasn't that money well spent? Tommy says, I was at the LFS and their tanks were full of Aptasia. Is that normal? I'm scared to buy anything from them. Aptasia are not evil. They are just glass anemones. They're pest anemones. We don't want them in our tank. When you're buying something from anyone, you may end up with Aptasia in there anyway. Now, if you're buying fish from the local fish store, it doesn't matter. I mean, Aptasia don't live on or in the fish. So you can get the fish, you can put it through safety stop that gets rid of external parasites, and then you set it free into your reef. No new Aptasia. But if you buy anything else, cleanup crew, coral, invertebrate, could sneak in, and it a lot of times does, and that's where they come from. So we just use a product like F-Aptasia, which stands exactly what you think it stands for, to get rid of them, and you just control it. But if you are looking at a certain coral that you really like and it's covered in Aptasia, I probably would pass as well. But if you can find something that looks relatively clean and you can bring it home, you can dip it, you can scrape off the few that you find. You can even put it in a quarantine tank and observe and scrape off any more that pop up before it finally goes in your tank. You know, there's nothing to be fearful of. I'm way worse about a fish store. If I go in a store and the store is just dirty, I'm not a big fan. But if the fish are sick, I don't want to buy anything. I mean, if I just see sick fish, I'm just like, I'm just turned off. So that to me is way more concerning than seeing Aptasia in some of their tanks. Michael says, your tank looks amazing. Thank you. It actually looks much better in person. Mina says, I love this so much. It's so rewarding to pay homage to our loved ones like you're doing. Trust me, when it starts to unfold, you'll reap these rewards. Can't wait to see it. Talking about Caitlin's new tank. Aquapuncture says, 17 years is a long wait. I don't think you should have to feel guilty. Yeah, no, I mean, it was kind of impulsive to just suddenly jump on this, but man, it's like this was the chance of a lifetime. I had to get it. And I remember when I talked with Eric 2 months ago, I said, hey, if I wanted to get C. interruptus, which Centropage interruptus, what would that cost me? And it was actually higher a few months ago. It was $2,500. And I was like, yeah, I'll never be that customer. Never mind. I just wanted to ask. And he's like, okay. And when I was talking to him on the phone, he actually said, you know, Mark, I might have even called you back and offered you a slightly better price because we're friends. He said, but from our impression, you know, from our conversation, I felt like you would never do it. So when I turned around and I got this one, he was really surprised. But it came from Karen. It wasn't just some random fish that came from the ocean. It made a difference to me for some reason. On some deep level, it made a huge difference. I was like, I'm getting a fish from Karen Britton, tank raised, captive bred. This is fantastic. And I'm just super glad that I got it. I'm so happy I got it. As a matter of fact, when I called Felicia, because I had some questions about tiny fish and tiny tanks, she was so excited. She couldn't even have a conversation with me. She's like, I cannot believe you got it. You got that fish. Because she knew about it. And there was only 2, you know. So, I mean, it was really exciting. Mahmoud says, have you heard any updates about the Lacey Act? Actually, I just saw a video that was shared yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to watch it. Apparently, USARC, which is the reptile people, are making a giant impact on the Lacey Act argument and you know, apparently they've gotten the government's attention. So I need to watch the video because I don't know. But I do believe some kind of decision's happening like by July, and there will be like another final push one more time to reach out to let our senators know that we do not want this to pass. Let's see. Reef Keeper also chimed in about the Alcatronics, saying it's a standalone unit, which I knew. Oh, totally standalone. It doesn't need to plug into anything. It literally is its own thing. Okay, thank you. And he says he has 2 of them and they work awesome. Super cheap to run. Yeah, I knew. I think the tests are like, what, like 3 cents a test? It's nothing. Zach says, would putting an air stone in my RODI barrel gas off the CO2 from my well water and raise pH in the tank? Okay, so let's kind of unpack that for a second, because you actually do want to do some of what you described, but you don't want to do the RODI. If you take so I'm going to explain first why you don't want to do it and then what you do want to do. I'm looking at the wrong camera again. I'm over here. Sorry. If you have a barrel of RODI water, it's 0 TDS, hopefully. If the barrel was pristine and you added 0 TDS, the barrel should measure 0. Odds are you put in 0 TDS water into that barrel, and by the time it's full, it may measure 1 or 2. Just some little contaminant got in there. It just is what it is. The barrel is not 100% steam cleaned, pristine, okay? There's just a little bit of stuff on there. If you were to put an air pump, bubbling air into your brand new RODI water, your deionized water, it will literally attract everything out of the air and add TDS to the barrel. And your water that was 0 or 1 and 2, like I was saying, could be 40 or 60 or 80 because you pumped in basically dirty air from the air, the stuff you're breathing, that your nose filters and your lungs handle, and it will make your deionized water dirty. So we never want to actually oxygenate DI water. And the reason being is that deionized water is like a huge magnet for anything. It's looking to soak stuff up. And there was this guy years ago on the forums who really, really loved SpectraPure. And he posted all the time. I mean, he just defended the SpectraPure unit. He lived in Arizona. And he talked about how he had his barrel out in the garage. And he could make this fantastic, perfect water. But he had the garage door open because it is so hot in Arizona. And he had a fan blowing down on that DI water. And you know what that's doing? Anything from the neighborhood that's wafting into his garage is hitting the fan and blowing into that water and making that water not 0 TDS. So making perfect water and then polluting it is the wrong way to go. So don't do that. All right, so now we've got that out of the way. Your well water has high CO2. You're trying to drive it off. You do want to take the RO water in a barrel and oxygenate that. So I would take a big, huge PVC pipe and run it to the bottom, 2 inches, 2.5, 3 inches, something like that, and just lean it diagonally in your barrel of water, okay? So you've got your barrel. I'm going to pretend you're talking about a 55-gallon barrel, okay? A big barrel. It's got 40, 50 gallons of water in it. You take your PVC pipe and you just stand it in there at an angle like a straw, and then you take your air stone, which get a ceramic one because it's heavy, and a long piece of airline tubing, and just snake it down the pipe so that it's down to the bottom, bubbling in the pipe. And then the air will only be in the pipe. You're not trying to bubble the barrel. You're bubbling the water in the pipe. And then you'll take another piece of tubing and put it down the same pipe somewhere down the line. And you'll run that RO water with some kind of a pump, like a dosing pump or a permeate pump or something along those lines. I'm not really sure, because this is the part I've not done myself. But you're going to pump that water from the oxygenated tube through your DI stage, and your DI resin will last a lot longer. And you will end up having the better DI water. You'll have this pure water. It's not polluted, so don't worry about that. I know you said, well, what about the air and the RO? The RO water is not catching TDS like DI water will. That's why you can oxygenate that RO water without wrecking it. But if you were to oxygenate DI water, the DI gets all polluted. So you're literally going to take that RO water that came out of the RO system. You're going to use the air to off-gas the CO2. It's going to raise the pH like you said. That water is then going to pump through the DI stage into a second barrel. Now you have DI water, which should be covered to keep any pollutants out, and it's ready. And I met a guy who did this exact thing, and he showed me a setup in his basement, and I found it really fascinating. And ever since, when people say I use well water, I always wonder, is their DI resin being spent really quickly because of the CO2? Or did they set up this system where they go RO, oxygenate, pump through DI water ready to go? So it's an extra step, unfortunately, for well water people, but it is the way to make your DI resin last much, much longer. Adam says, as someone who is new to sumps, how do I determine the appropriate water level? Good question. You want to make sure that your oh, hang on. My RODI system just filled my reservoirs to the top and was still trying to run. I could hear some buzzing. I had to turn it off. The water level in the sump is kind of, there's different spots. Now, if you just have a sump, which basically is a glass aquarium or an acrylic one that has no baffles, it's just a puddle of water, then you are going to want a fixed height all the way across all the time. So for example, most protein skimmers seem to work really well in about 8 inches of water. Some not so much. They're like the Reef octopus. I think they like to be in shallower water, like 6 inches. So if you had a Reef octopus skimmer, you would want the water in your sump to be 6 inches high, and you'd want an auto top-off system to maintain that 6 inches all the time. If you add more water and it goes up to 7 inches, the skimmer may overflow. If it gets too low, the skimmer will probably still operate, but your return pump could start venturing in air and then pumping air bubbles into your tank. So you want to have a exactly same height of water in your sump all the time. Now, if your sump has compartments and you've got a skimmer zone, you've got a refugium, you've got a return zone, what happens is most sumps are like this way. They go in at one height, then they drop to the next level, and they drop to the next level. And so you would have your skimmer zone at, like I said, 8 or 9 inches. And if your skimmer needs to be in shallower water, you can put a skimmer stand under to lift it up to the correct depth it needed to be. And then it flows into that refugium zone that's a little shallower. And that one doesn't matter. You just have a light over it. And then the third one would be at about an inch lower than the refugium. That's your return zone. And that one needs the auto top-off switch or sensor or float in that specific spot to maintain that level in the return zone, the same height all the time. You never want that to vary. I mean, it can, but you don't want it to. So using an automated top-off system maintains the same water level in the sump, and it will never suck in air bubbles. And so your tank stays nice and clear like mine behind me, and you don't see a lot of bubbles pumping out of the valves and pumping into the tank and blowing around. So that's kind of the answer. I hope that made sense. I'm reading this before I explain it, before I recite it to y'all. Winter Water is going through a young tank syndrome with all the ugly stuff, and said they had a cyanobacteria infestation, so they treated with ChemiClean, and then after it took 2 doses to get rid of it, but then dinoflagellates came on, and got that under control with Dino X, and now the cyano is back. Yeah, you're really getting kicked in the butt. Okay, that's the truth. And it's unfortunate that this happens. It doesn't have to be like this. It's not supposed to be like this all the time. The dinoflagellates, okay, so here is really, this goes back to my conversation with Tulio. Had I bought a bunch of dry rock from Marco Rock, or if I had got stacks from Too Little Fishy, which are those flat, weird-looking brick things, they're interesting, but they don't look natural to me. And it's fun to make things look like Legos, I guess, but in a reef tank, I guess once it's covered in coral and I can't see it, it's perfect. But while I'm looking at it, I'm like, I kind of rather look at that at a trade show than look at it daily in my house. Okay, that's just my personal opinion. But it's dry rock. And everyone's been using dry rock now for years. And they're dealing with these issues with dinoflagellates, with the cyano, with the diatom blooms, with the silica issues. All these horrible things are happening where back in the day, we set up brand new tanks with live rock from the ocean, and we didn't have these issues. Yes, we had some cyano, okay? I mean, that was a seasonal thing. It's just completely normal. But the dinos, few people got it. And the few that got it had no resolution. They tried everything and pretty much lost everything and left the hobby, almost always. It was so unbelievably awful, and no one understood what this snot stuff was. And they tried everything. They tried kalkwasser, they tried water change, they tried no lights, they tried adding different chemicals. Nothing was working. It was just a beating and a half. And like I said, I mean, it was a hobby killer. People say, if you told someone I got dinos, like, oh, I'm sorry, because they were like, we're not going to see you much longer. I mean, it was just a given. So nowadays we have dinoflagellate support groups on Facebook that tell you exactly to use Dr. Tim's waste away, to have a microscope to know exactly what type of dinoflagellate you're dealing with. You know, there's Dino X from Fauna Marin that can work over a period of weeks. It's nothing quick and fast. And the reason being is everyone's trying everything with sterile everything. Sterile sand, sterile rock, sterile water that they filter themselves, right? Everything's pure. There's not one normal thing that came from the ocean. Everything is artificial. And then they want to put in corals and they expect to have this gorgeous reef. And yet it's missing those key things that nature embraces in the oceans, okay? I mean, everything's there that these corals need in the ocean. And the only thing that's hurting them is us. I mean, that's not me just, you know, throwing disparagement out there. I mean, the fact is humans are messing up the oceans, and it's adding to acidification, pollution runoff, the temperature rising in the waters. I mean, all these things are happening because there's so many of us here. And unfortunately, there's people out there just wrecking our planet. I mean, they're just polluting it. I care about where I put my trash and my recycling every single week. And then I see videos of bags of trash being thrown off of cruise ships into the ocean, or islands that just put it into the ocean, or the storms that wash it into the ocean. I mean, a hurricane comes through. It's not like you're basically trying to stay alive. And if things in your yard blow out into the ocean, you're just like glad you weren't one of them, right? But I feel like we will continue to try to do better because we have to if we want to enjoy this planet. We've all been watching movies like Mad Max for our lives, you know, throughout our lives. And we've, you know, the future is there's no water. We're fighting to the death with guns to get the last drop of water to grow a seed of a possible tomato plant. You know what I'm talking about? You know, those kind of movies. But we're not quite there yet, thank goodness. But we've got kids that have come up with a way to deal with the Pacific garbage patch that's out there on the ocean, and trying to process it and break it down. We've got people out there figuring out about the plastics and what they can do to stop it. But all these things are happening, but yet there's still so much life in the ocean, fortunately, still. And nature has found a way, right? But we have these pristine systems that start from dry, and everyone's so terrified of everything that could be a pest. There's like, oh my God, if Aptasia gets in my tank, it's going to ruin my hobby. Like, no, don't worry about bristleworms and Aptasia. And if you get a flatworm, so be it. And if you find some micro brittle stars, good. And Asterinas are not the devil. I mean, there's so many cool little things. And there's all these different bacterias and, you know, the aquabiomedics that's studying the different types of bacteria we have in our tank. It's because there's a lack of it. And so we're taking things, you know, like Lagerlof Enhance and adding bacteria into the system. And when you get a new coral from someone, their bacteria on that is going into your system. And if you're getting live sand from other people's tanks and you're kind of diversifying the bacteria in your sand bed so that you don't have a mono level of bacteria. Like, you don't want just one bacteria in your tank. You want the mixture of all of them. And that's what helps to fight off things like dinoflagellates, because when's the last time you heard about a dinoflagellate outbreak in the ocean? You know, we might see areas where there's a lot of cyano. I've seen it in person. Bob Fenner did when we were diving. He said it made him really sad. He said, I used to come to these dives and there was never any cyano, and now I see so much. And not only did we see cyano, we saw bits of trash blowing around, and we were grabbing it and taking it to shore and putting it in a trash can. So, but that's the thing. Your tanks these days are starting off with a deficit because they don't have the benefit of all the wonderfulness that is live rock. And so when I tell you guys get live rock, you know, I know it costs a lot. I remember in the early 2000s, people said, you know what? Maybe we could buy some live rock and some base rock and save some money and still have a nice reef tank. And that worked. They would take, you know, like 50% base rock, which was dry rock, and they'd put 50% live rock on top of it. So the base rock was down in the sand or down on the glass, and then the live rock on top, and they had the benefit of both. And in about 9 to 12 months, the base rock became live rock. All that stuff on the live rock migrated also and spread, and it made the whole tank do better. And then in the next year, the tank starts to really kick into its good, it's doing well. And by year 3 or 4, it's a rockin' gorgeous reef. So we want that, right? It's a slow marathon, okay? There's no sprint to a gorgeous tank. You guys have watched me grow my tank. You've watched things go wrong last year, and I was able to turn around. It's on the upswing now, but it's got a long way to go to be to the level I'm used to, and I'm just waiting it out. I'm being I am trying to be Mr. Patient. But when your tank is going through these ugly cycles, all you can do is deal with those cycles, knowing that time is on your side. And as it goes through these, it will basically burn those things out. And then they should basically cease, as long as your nutrients don't bottom out. Now, would it be beneficial to add 1 or 2 pieces of live rock to an existing tank that's dealing with problems? Possibly, but you can't just order yourself some live rock online, receive the rock, and take the thing and drop it in your tank, because the die-off that happened during shipping would then affect your tank and create a mini cycle. We don't want to hurt the reef. We don't want to hurt what you got. We don't want to make it worse. So if you want to order some live rock, you got to set up a small tank to put them in, or a barrel, or a Rubbermaid container, or whatever. Add, brand new salt water, put the rock in there, add Powerhead, add Live Rock Enhance, let it simmer for 3-4 weeks, make sure there's no ammonia. And then when you take it out of the water and you smell it, and if it smells like a clean ocean and doesn't smell rotting and doesn't have black areas, if it looks clean and ready to go and there's nothing on there that gives you any concern, I'm not talking about sponges. I'm talking about what looks like real death, things that just look vile, smell vile, sulfuric, putrid, something looks like it's rotting like mold. Okay, that's a different thing. That one you don't want to put in your tank. But if it's a clean looking rock, even if it's covered in goodies, that can go in your reef and your whole reef will benefit from it. The rock I bought was $5 a pound before shipping. So just to give you a reference point. I know Unique Corals is selling. I actually took down some information yesterday because I had a couple different companies come forward. So here are the 3 companies that sell live rock if you are even slightly interested. One is called Salty Bottom Reef Company, and I think they're here in the Texas, Louisiana side of the Gulf. Then there's Unique Corals out of California, and they're bringing in live rock from Australia, which is cool, but it's really expensive. And then there's Gulf Live Rock that I got from Florida. So those are 3 companies right off the top, and there might be more, but those are 3 where you can get real live rock, like live rock with things on it. And I mean, I explained to Frank when I went to the store, I want some live rock, and we went back to look in his bin. It was really low, almost empty, and I thought I saw Tonga branch. I was like, oh, sweet, and I picked it up, and it was fake Tonga branch. I could feel it. Tonga branch was dense. I mean, it used to be a coral skeleton, some kind of staghorn acro. I mean, like big, thick, round stuff. And then the branches got thinner as you got near the tip. And Tonga branch was very popular in the 2000s. And you had your rock, which usually looked like potatoes. And then you had some Tonga branch sticking out. And gave some structure and some cool look. And there was this one guy in California that I visited. And he, I know I took pictures, but if I ever find them, I'll share them. But he did an entire tank, like a 120-gallon tank, with only Tonga branch. And the branches came down like roots of a tree, and then they came up like this. I mean, it was completely a lattice work of Tonga branch. It was fantastic. And he planted corals all over it, and there was no, I mean, I guess this is bad. There was no hiding spaces. The fish were swimming through the holes, and they could go anywhere in that tank, where normally I like to have an aquascape where the fish have a place to duck and cover, a spot they call home, the little territory they defend. And in that tank, there was no such thing, but it looked so unique and so cool. And I don't know how long that tank ran or how well it worked, but it was really, really, really pretty to see. So like I said, if I ever find the picture, I'll share it with you guys here on YouTube so you can see it also, because it's definitely one to appreciate. But the fake Tonga branch, it would only give me some character in the tank, but it wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't benefit my tank, so I didn't really want to spend the money on it, so I didn't buy it. But the little bits I put in here, they're good enough. And the tank's going to look kind of empty to you guys, and that's okay, because that's exactly how Caitlin would have had it. Rick says, we are starting to have our summer blackouts. Usually not more than 3 or 4 hours. What backup battery do you recommend? I have a generator, but it's a pain for 3 or 4 hours. I actually bought batteries at Batteries Plus, and I think they're called marine batteries, and I got 4 of them. And then I wired them all up with a friend. His name is Mike, and I actually asked him if he would come on the show so we could actually, or if he would just do a video with me where we could show exactly how we made the whole thing. And he said yes. So I just need to follow up with him and make that happen, and I would be happy to create this for you guys. So if you want to mimic it. The one rule about these batteries is they can't be inside your home. they need to be like outside or in the garage or somewhere where apparently the fumes of batteries are risky. I don't know. But mine are in my workshop, which is climate controlled, air conditioned, and but it's the workshop is an entire garage. It's a 2-car garage. It's a big space, and I didn't feel like putting them outside in a hot shed where it could be 100 degrees and then running the wires through the attic. So I chose to do it inside my garage, and that's not airtight. And matter of fact, when I turn on Minion to do my acrylic work, I have 2 different things vacuuming the air right out of the room. And my room is nice, 73, 74 degrees, and by the time Minion's done, it's 81 degrees in there because it sucked out all the good air and sucked in warm air through every crack it can, including under the garage door. So I'm not concerned that I've got like trapped battery fumes in there that are going to kill me. But that is a concern. And there's a different kind of battery you can buy where that's not even a risk, and I think it just costs 3 times as much. But at the time, I was doing this during our ice storm in February last year, and I just said, what do you got left? And they said, well, we got whatever you need. And I was like, well, I want some huge batteries. I want to run them in a series so that way I have a big, long duration of battery. And that's what they sold me. And if I added more batteries to my array, I could have even more time. And so right now, according to Mike, my Vortex and my Vectra pumps would all run for 24 hours at their normal speed, not even reducing because the power has changed. Because that's the Ecotech battery backup system is designed that when you have power, they run at whatever level you got set to. Let's say 63%, 68%, 79%. But then when you go into battery backup mode, it's supposed to do like 25%. And you set that up in EcoSmart Live or in Mobius. So in my situation, I'm actually not positive, but according to Mike, we computed all the power being sucked by all the pumps at the same time. And then he says, okay, and he did the math of the battery. He says, you should be able to go 24 hours with all those guys running at normal speed. Now, like I said, I don't know if they're actually at normal speed or if they go in that reduction mode. I'm just not positive. I'll have to ask him. But when we make the video, I'll show you all the things we did and all the pieces we bought and explain how he did what he did to make sense of it. And that way you'll have a nice system that will keep your stuff going for a few hours so you don't have to worry about it. Brad Hobbies says, what is a safe nitrate level to introduce snails or anemone? Typically a tank that's 20 or lower, you're not going to have any issues with anything. My tank had nitrates as high as 80, and we put in, I put in a cleanup crew, no surprises. Dwayne showed up all his gorgeous corals from Seattle. We put them in, and they didn't even skip a beat, which I was so sure my water was killing them, and it wasn't. But my tank now is nowhere near those levels it used to be. But I don't think you have to worry about that. It's just a matter of how to acclimate the snails properly. And if you're buying them at the fish store and you're getting them home within 45 minutes, usually you're just opening the bags and adding a cup of water every, a cup, like a measuring cup, into the bag every 7 minutes. And after about 45 minutes to an hour, you can release your snails and hermit crabs. If you're buying them online, they might ship them to you essentially dry, like with a wet paper towel. And those, you're supposed to put them, double check their instructions, please. Don't just do what Mark said. But as far as I recall, all you do is put them in you add tank water and you shake the bag around to rinse off the ammonia off their shells, and you throw that water away, and then you reach into the bag and you grab all your rinsed off hermit crabs and snails and you put them in your tank. But a lot of companies will specifically say, this is how to acclimate. Don't use your regular system. Don't be stubborn. Listen to us, because they want you to have success and they don't want to ship you things that just die. They didn't ship you bad guys. And I've talked to companies that said, we have customers that will say, I have been in this hobby a long time. I know how to acclimate. Don't tell me how to do it. And they say, and they suffer these losses because they won't listen. So always follow the directions. Nick says, I live in the Ukraine. Wow, you are in a really dangerous area. And he says, I know you know what's happening here. You help us a lot. Can you really help me? You're a rich person and you can do everything, but I can't buy a blue surgeonfish for my child's birthday. To be honest, I'm surprised you're trying to acquire any kind of livestock right now with what's going on in your country, because, the infrastructure is even at risk with what's happening. So I'm not looking to buy a fish for someone where they might have to run away from their homes for, to save their lives. Okay, so I hope you take that in the right. I care that what's happening. I actually stand with Ukraine. I don't like what Russia was doing. I can't believe you guys have stayed free this long. It's amazing to me, and I'm really proud of what's been accomplished so far. That's as far as I get into the politics, but I don't know what to tell you for your child's birthday. I don't even I can't even imagine your living conditions or going to work or buying groceries. I can't understand any of that. I picture it being an absolute impossibility. So I do wish you the best, and thanks for chiming in on the live stream. Let's see. Justin says, having troubles with flow in a 150-gallon tank, 6 feet long. I have some LPS and softies. The MP40s on a low setting is brutal, it seems. My gyre is low too, used for surface agitation, but the corals are leaning. So you're having too much flow in a 6-foot tank? A 6-foot tank can handle a lot of flow. It comes down to placement of corals. So typically softies are down on the sand. And LPS corals can also be down very low in the tank. They don't have to be up high. What goes up high would be your SPS corals. So I mean, I tend to run my vortex around 40 to 60% of what they could run. I don't run anywhere close to 100%. And like right behind me over my shoulder here, you can see an MP60, and yet you can see the sand bed is basically intact. It's not being blown. And this is almost everything there is SPS. There's one LPS right here, and it's under and behind a rock, so it's not getting any kind of direct flow from that pump. And then I've got a vortex back here that you can't quite see in the frame. Let me see if I can change this for you. So there's a vortex right there blowing forward, and there's a Gorgonian in the corner that doesn't get any direct hit, obviously, because the water is blowing this way and sucking back. And yet all these LPS are barely moving. They got movement, which is what I wanted, but it's not strong movement. So I would say it's just a matter of how you've got your power heads arranged in your tank to find that that sweet spot. And it could be the vortex too low, the vortex too high. The gyres, you can change the way they can blow downward, they can blow upward. You can have one blow up and one blow down. If you bought the knife, you can actually point it straight down and have it blow this way around the tank or this way around the tank. So you got a lot of choices when it comes to those different pumps. And you can use Reef Crest instead of just steady flow. And Reef Crest will give you a flow, but it will slow down, it'll ramp up, but it'll stay within a certain range you like. But corals can handle quite a bit of flow. Alex says, is too much coralline algae bad? Depends who you're talking to. If the glass is covered and you can't see through it, that's bad. If you have pumps that are super encrusted and they're impossible to clean, that could be bad. But if you have coralline all over your rock work, might be good. Some people in the past have talked about how they have so much coralline on the rock work, the rock has become dense. It can no longer have water pass through it because it has like this shell of coralline. And that's where the Live Rock Enhance comes in, because it helps clean out those pores and can actually break up a little space in there. But coralline will definitely grow better with Live Rock Enhance. Let's see. Jay says, what's your quarantine practice, specifically tangs and wrasses? For me, it's safety stop. It's not even quarantine. It's a rapid 2-hour bath going from one chemical to another chemical. So you get the fish, you acclimate it to the tank, and then you scoop out a gallon of water out of the tank and you put in part A, which is formalin. And you have it in the bucket. There's 1 gallon of formalin and tank water. You put the fish in there with a small heater. Like I get the credit card heater from Petco that is like 8 watts. And I put in an air stone, and it's in there for 45 minutes. And I check on it frequently to make sure the fish is okay. And then after that 45 minutes is up, I scoop another gallon of water out of my reef into another bucket, and I move the credit card heater and the air stone over, and I put in the part B, which is methylene blue, and then I move the fish into that. And that gets rid of external parasites. And then after that point, it goes into this thing, the Peacemaker, and it sits in there for 3 days to de-stress and for me to feed it directly. And then after 3 days, I release it into the tank. Now, I know most people, when they talk about quarantine, they literally talk about a separate quarantine aquarium. And I'm thinking this year I'm going to actually set one up which will be just a standalone system. It won't have any kind of filtration on it. It will be a box of water with a heater and a power head and a light. And it'll be, if I come home with corals, they can go straight into that tank. Or if I come home with a fish, and go straight into that tank. And I can observe it longer than the 2-hour bath thing that I'm doing. But I've been using Safety Stop for 10 years. Since the minute that came out, I became very lazy when it came to quarantine. And I just haven't had to deal with a lot of fish diseases. So I feel like it works pretty well. But Safety Stop does not take care of internal parasites at all. It's an external parasite only. But I put yellow tangs through it. I put the cold tang through it. I put the that's the ones that went through it. And I've put through yellow chorus wrasse, leopard wrasse, cleaner wrasse. I did probably did the mystery wrasse back in the day. I had that for a long time. It's gone. And I had a Christmas wrasse also went through it. So I mean, I've done it with those fish. It works. Oh, there we go. Adam says, I have well water. I do something similar. I use the Tom's Aqua Lifter. It works well to move the RO water through the DI resin. That's true, but as he says, they're hard to find, which is sad because it's such a cool little pump. Didn't cost much, and it just did the job. So he's using an Avast Marine diaphragm pump. Okay, good. Thank you very much for telling us that. Let's see. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Congratulations on your marriage. He just got married last week. Or a week ago, and has been doing honeymooning all week. I can't believe he's on the live stream already. Newlywed. Let's see. Reef with Mina says, there's so much gunk and algae all over my rocks after the diatoms. It just looks bad. In this case, will Live Rock Enhance be beneficial? Absolutely. It will completely clean up that rock work. It'll look really, really good. Mahmoud says, I'm moving in a little over a month. My sand bed is 3 years old and supplies most of the food for my diamond goby. If I go with a new sand bed, will the goby starve? Well, you feed the tank too, and food lands on the sand. So going with new sand is smart. There will be very little bacteria unless you're putting in all bags of live sand, which would be good. You can take a cup of the old sand, like literally a cup or two, and put in a Ziploc bag. And when you do your move, you set up the new tank with the new sand, you add a little bit of water, and then you would go ahead and take your bag of used sand and just make a molehill, just a hill on top. Don't spread it out. Don't try to thin it out. Just put the hill on top, keep adding your rock work, add more water, try not to touch it, and let the flow just kind of dissipate that sand, and all the beneficial bacteria and stuff, and the worms that are in the old sand will migrate into your new sand bed and start things going. That goby will probably decimate most of it, but it's still a good starting point. It just depends how long you're going to run this tank before you move the livestock into it. But you can feed food, and that fish will eat food as well. It may be living off some of the sand, but I would think the lion's share of its food's coming from the daily feedings, wouldn't it? Odile says, how is Jack doing? Your tank looks awesome. Jack's doing great. She's being really quiet today, which is awesome. I didn't even close the door. She's resting on the bed, just looking out the window, watching for anything that walks by or flies by or runs by. Justin says, I test my tank weekly using mainly Hanna kits and logging everything in Reef Trace. Thanks, by the way. My parameters are solid, but I've been wondering why reefers use 2-part or carbon dose for all the supplements when my water changes have been working well. Just wondering if there's something I'll eventually need. Yeah, well, to be honest, what's going on there is you've set up your tank and it seems to be doing okay just based on the water changes. What happens is when you find that water changes aren't giving you enough of the elements you need, when you are seeing that the alkaline just keeps going down or the calcium keeps going down and magnesium just doesn't hold, when you're at that point, that's when you have to start supplementing and you have to start adding it because you have so much livestock in the tank now, it needs the dosing. So that's how that works. And I would just say that for now, if you don't have to do it, that's great. I really don't want to have to set up dosers on Caitlin's tank. I am planning to keep it very simple and let it be nutrient rich, because if it could be nutrient rich, I can grow zoanthids and ricordias like crazy in there, and because they do really well in dirty water. But you know, if push comes to shove at some point, I have to stick something on there to dose, I will obviously do it for the needs of the few corals I put in there. But I don't want this to be a coral reef. I don't want to turn into an entire exhibit thing that just has such a high demand. That's what this is for. I want that to be simple. Because that's how she would have kept it. She would have kept it simple. Mike says, my new skylight arrived today. Is it better to run with Apex or standalone? How difficult is the installation? Installation's easy, and you have choices. You can do it standalone, or you can do it with the Apex. If you own the Apex, I would definitely do it with the Apex. And you don't plug it into the energy bar, though. You plug it into the wall. So you're not wasting outlets on your EB832, or if you're using the older EB4 and EB8, you're not having to waste those outlets. Those can be used for heaters and dosing pumps and skimmers and stuff. But you can plug the Sky directly into a nearby outlet. It's got a super long cord, and then there's an Aquabus cable that will then plug into the Apex ecosystem. And then you can do programming right there in Fusion for the perfect lighting schedule. But if you don't want to use that benefit and you do it standalone, then you're going to have a Bluetooth app that you will use to control your lights, which will be, it's like a dummy app. And you're like, I want all blue, I want AB+, I want daylight. You know, you have 3 or 4 to pick, and you just bink, and that's what it is. And you can program it that way. But the benefit of having hooked up to the Apex is more control, and you can install other people's profiles. Some people are using the Milo's Reef profile for their lighting schedule. They like my design, and they're mimicking that over their reefs, which is kind of cool. It's kind of neat to know people are doing that. And you know, if I was not happy with mine, I could install Dwayne's, and I could use his lighting system and see how that goes for my tank. Didn't know that at all. Reef the Sea Forever says, believe it or not, Petco sells Fiji live rock. Wow. I didn't know that. And yes, $5 is cheap for live rock. That's why I was happy for $5 a pound. I was like, yeah, done. And you can look on their website. There's only a couple of pictures, but they show you that. They show you going out into the ocean and bringing it back on a boat and then on a trailer and back to their facility. So, I mean, you can kind of get an idea of what it is. And obviously, if you wanted more pictures of something before you buy it, you could just contact them through their website, and you could say, I'd like to see what I'm getting. And that way you can decide. Reef Keeper says, curious to know how long you usually leave new additions in your Peacekeeper before releasing them into the main display. I have a copper band in an acclimation box as we speak. Usually 3 days. And the whole reason for the fish being in that box is so they can see each other. My new fish and all the other fish can see each other. And when I feed the tank, I feed the box at the exact same time. So there's food in the box and food blowing everywhere. So the smell is everywhere. And it works out really well. But the main benefit of the acclimation box is that the brand new fish just got scooped up in a net, went into a bag, shook home in a car, came in, scooped up or dumped into a bucket. Then there's this drip thing happening, and people are walking up and looking down at it from above. And it goes through all this stress. And then finally you're scooping it out and you want to put it in your tank, and it's a stress monster. It's releasing a stress hormone that it's in panic mode, that it's in flight mode. And all the other fish sense that stress hormone, and they just, through their DNA, think, I must attack that thing that's stressed. I must go after it. And that's why you see the fighting with brand new fish. So you'll have some hobbyists that don't add the new fish until late in the evening. You'll have other people that will turn off all the lights on the tank. Sometimes people will feed the tank food first so the fish are fat and full and hopefully taking a siesta so you can sneak in the new guy. There's different techniques. But I found that putting the fish in the Peacemaker will allow it to stay in there and de-stress. Even if they sense the hormone, they can't attack it. It's safe in the box. And then after 3 days, I literally just take the box and I just tilt it over and the fish swims into the reef. There's no net involved. If you needed to and you wanted to, you could actually reach in, because the box is 12 inches by 6 inches wide. You could reach in with your hand, you could lift it out and release it into the water. Now this little guy here, this little guy right here, this little guy right here, I can't even point to the right spot. You can see him right there. I reached into the bucket that it was acclimated in with my hand, and I held it in my little palm, and it did its little thing with its tail, which I knew meant I don't like this. And then I put it in the Peacemaker. And it's doing really, really well. I mean, fingers crossed that nothing goes wrong in my life. Oh, Gary says lithium batteries are better. People in van life use them. Oh, yeah, people that live in their vans. They are much safer and you can run them below the 50%, whereas the marine batteries, you can't go below that or it will ruin the batteries. Fair enough. Now, my battery array, like I said, you'll see the whole video, and when I show it to you, you'll find out how I have it hooked up to a trickle charger. And I found that with my specific setup, because of the booster cable I have to use for the Vector pumps, it was pulling this 200 milliamps of power all the time because it was lighting an LED on the stupid booster cable. And that was causing an error with the trickle charger, and the trickle charger would just like error out and would just not trickle. It wouldn't add any power. And I was like, that's not good. So my simplest workaround was to literally plug my trickle charger into a daily mechanical timer that turns it off for 15 minutes. And then it restarts and it verifies and it trickle charges again. And I could probably even do that like every couple of days instead of every day. It's just the way to solve the error issue, and it got rid of it entirely. One person said, I just got here. What did I miss? Nothing. Same person is trying to get caught up. That is a Japanese pygmy angelfish. Justin, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Reef Maniac says, how are your Neptune skies, the LEDs over my tank, working out for you? They're doing great. I actually tried to change the color to the live stream color, but this camera really doesn't like it. It's a 1080p Logitech. It doesn't like it when I change the lighting at all. It just looks worse. And this fish looked terrible. So I was like, okay, forget it. We won't change the lighting. I've got the right filter on the camera. You can see the fish for what it is. It looks what I'm seeing with my eye. So that's why I have it the way it's set up right now. So anyway, I've been running the skies for a solid year. I think I installed them in May of last year. So here we are. I'm coming up on month 13. I'm very happy with them. They do their job. And I can, like I said, change things on demand as needed. Oh, Dale, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Reef Keeper says, thanks, Mila's Reef, for spending $2,000 on an interruptus. Makes my $500 fish seem cheap. It is the most expensive fish I've ever bought in my life, and I never thought I'd be that person. Mode, I think is the way you say that. So does dosing bacteria like Microbacter 7 help clean up diatoms? Diatoms are not bad, okay? Diatoms are food for bacteria, but if you're looking at brown stuff on your sand too much, if you take your hand and go like whoosh over the surface of the sand and the brown kind of lifts up like dust and sinks again, that is maybe not diatoms. That could be mulm, M-U-L-M. And Microbacter 7 does help with that brown stuff. So you could do that, and you don't have to dose much. I think on my big tank, I was putting in something ridiculously small. I can't remember because I did it like 8 months ago. But for a brief period, I was putting in like 9 milliliters a day or 9 drops or something. And I thought, man, my system's huge. How is this the right amount? But the little bit of brown that's happened in my sand just immediately went away. So yes, the answer should be yes to your question. Adam says, any suggestions for dealing with a relatively insane number of vermitids? The one surefire method is to manually remove them one by one with dental tools, where you literally scrape them off and remove the worm. You can break off the tubes and put glue over each hole, but like you said, an insane amount. So it's almost like you have to work rock by rock through your reef, and you might actually want to like take the work tray, which is something I sell on my website, and you put it on top of the tank with PVC pipe so you can put it wherever you like. Take the rock out of your tank, break up all the vermitids, scrape the things you don't like, put the rock in the tank, get the next rock, and you kind of work your way across the reef over a series of sessions. You know, you might do it every couple of days until you get them whittled down. And then having wrasses like the yellow chorus wrasse can help to eat them, especially little ones, because they can get everywhere. And they can go ahead and start eating these guys. If you break off the tubes, hermit crabs can reach in with their claws and pull the worm out too before it can grow a long calcified tube to protect itself. Joe says, why is my alkalinity going up without dosing? It's gone up plus 0.6 in a week in a 40-gallon cube. Well, I don't know why it's going up. Something you're adding must be adding it, or your testing is off for some reason. But don't worry too much about that. That's not a huge swing. 0.6 is okay. My own tank in the last month has gone from like 9.5 to about 8.4 as of today. And I would like to adjust that to go up a little bit higher. But I have to go do something. I refilled the calcium reactor not too long ago, but I got to adjust some stuff. There's just been changes that have been happening, and so my alkalinity has switched a little bit from where it was. But I would double check your numbers. Maybe your kit is old and expired and going bad. Maybe you have a bad batch of reagents. I mean, these things can happen. It's always nice to double check a number with a second test of some kind. So alkalinity is the cheapest test you can buy. Lots of brands make it. Elos, Tropic Marin, Fauna Marin, Salifert, Red Sea has it. The Hannah Checker is another one. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. They're all super fast. You just add drops, count, know the answer instantly. So I would just verify with a second kit before I made any decisions. Ah, there you go. Thank you, Reef Keeper. If you find the need to dose Caitlin's tank, Tropic Marin All for Reef is one dosing pump and works well. I implemented this into my small tank with water change because when my water changes couldn't keep up. Thank you. That's actually a great idea because I haven't had a reason to try that product, and that would be perfect for this little tank right here. I like that. Devin is here. He's just here to steal my audience. Recif Condi says, I'm sure I said that wrong. Question about Acropora staghorn coral. How do you make it thick? Mine is all thin branches. You know, I had a conversation with my friend just a couple days ago about that staghorn right there. And he was saying, let's see if I can do this. So you can kind of see right there. In the past, this coral was in the middle of my tank, right in front of all the flow. And the branches were really thick. And now the branches are much thinner. And we think because it's so much further away from the flow, so it's not making itself so thick. So it could be that if you had it closer to a lot of flow, your staghorn would be way more dense. It would have nice thick fingers. And but as there's less flow, the branches don't have to be as tough because they don't have to battle with the elements, so to speak. Paul says, I'm dealing with a kind of red slime or algae that is as well that's green, so it's red and green. It's not out of control. I've started waste away, but my inverts are eating it. Is that normal? I thought they don't eat cyano. Certain things will, not all of them. I know that the money cowries will eat them, and they'll just walk right through and just eat it. But I can't really think of a lot of things that intentionally want to eat cyanobacteria. So, I mean, it's nice if something's eating it. Will it eat it all and get rid of it? Probably not. Will you need to treat the tank? Maybe. For now, like you said, it's not out of control. You might be able to just siphon out the area that offends you. I have found in the past that when I had a small patch of algae that was irritating me, a little bit of cyano, if I just broke it up, like went through and kind of disturbed the sand, it kind of like broke all their bonds and they just kind of gave up on me and just stopped. So you might try that. Or it might spread. But for me, it just kind of, they had some really good growth and they were probably feeding off their core. And by me vacuuming out some and breaking up what was left, it just kind of dissipated and it all went away. Lawrence, yes, that is what it is. And then LS10 says, how long did you dose Microbacter 7 to see a difference on the sand bed? Did you do the daily smaller dose or weekly larger dose? I was doing daily, and I'd say within a matter of days I saw the difference. I mean, I catch things early on. I don't wait. I don't wait for things to become a big problem. I want to get in there. I want to solve it, because the sooner I address it, the sooner I can correct it, the less of a problem it is. When something is a full-blown issue, it takes way more time, energy, and money to fix it, and I don't like doing that. So I have treated my tank when there wasn't very much cyano. I had a whole bunch of people give me flack last year when I suddenly had a lot of problems in my tank and I didn't know what the problem was yet. And they said, well, it's your fault. I had a couple people specifically say, you just needed something for YouTube, so you just created a problem and treated, and now you got all these problems. Like, that's not what I was doing. And if I was doing YouTube or not doing YouTube, I would have done the exact same thing at that time. I had some cyano. There was definitely a lot growing in the refugium. I wanted to get rid of it. I treated the tank. It went away. As a matter of fact, the day before everything went wrong, my tank never looked better. My corals were fantastic. I took a ton of pictures because I was so impressed. And then the next day I did my big water change and everything went to crap. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And I was sure there was no way it was the water change because I've been using that salt for years and never had a problem. And I thought something else happened. And I think it was something like, I feel like it was 17 days till I had my answer. And so for a long time, I had a lot of guilt and I was trying to, puzzle together what was wrong. I had a couple of heart-to-hearts on my Reef diary saying, I believe this is what it was. And then finally I got my answer and I felt vindicated that I didn't do anything wrong. I just had a really bad batch of salt that got me. Normally they don't. Usually I test everything, but I, at that time, was not testing for potassium. And when I made my batch, I didn't know it had no potassium in it. And when I did my huge water change, it cut my potassium in the Reef in half. And the corals that really like potassium just started to just disintegrate. They just went downhill, and day after day, things got worse and worse and worse, when really it should have stabilized and stopped, and I could just watch the Reef slowly die a little bit more every day. And I was like, what is happening? So through 6 ICP tests, I got my answer. It just took a while to figure it out. Winterwater says, how come your refugium doesn't go sexual ever? I see a lot of people online recommending Chaeto over Caulerpa. I have never had luck with Chaetomorpha, and I think it's probably because I never have enough iron in my system. That's a guess. I have no way to prove that until I get a bunch of iron in my water and have it nice and solid. Then maybe I can grow Chaetomorpha like crazy. But every time I've ever put it in my system, and I try sporadically every so many years, I put it in there and it just melts away. It's there for a few days, a week, maybe a month, and then I can't find any. The Caulerpa that I have is called feather Caulerpa. It doesn't go sexual, and it's getting lit 9 hours a day. I don't run lights 24 hours a day. And the newest issue of Coral that's coming out next has an entire article about refugiums, and it was written by me. So you'll get to see that, and there's other authors as well. So you have some really good insight on Chaetomorpha, Caulerpa, and algae turf scrubbers and reactors and all that kind of stuff. That'll all be coming out. But yeah, this macroalgae, I had a different one in the past that would go sexual. And the solution was leave that light on 24 hours a day, and it never did it again. But when I switched to feather Caulerpa, the problem was resolved. And like I said, this stuff here that's in the tank with the, I'm sorry, this one right here, I'm trying to see where I'm pointing. That's the same stuff out of my refugium, and it's being lit with the lights over the tank, so it's getting the same 9-hour period or whatever it is. And the plants are green. They are not turning white. They're not going sexual. They're not dying. Aftershock says, any suggestions on inverts I can add to my tank which can hold their own against wrasses? Please. I have snails and hermits, but I was looking for something different and fun. That's the problem. Certain wrasses will eat certain things that, like for example, all the ornamental shrimp are usually off the table. You might be able to add different types of urchins possibly that your rat, you'll have to see what your wrasse, the ones you have, what they eat, what they prey on. And that way you can kind of figure it out. I like serpent starfish. I've never seen wrasses bother serpent starfish. I like fighting conchs or sand conchs, queen conchs. I like those. You may not be able to keep emerald crabs with wrasses, for example. You may not be able to keep blood shrimp, peppermint shrimp, cleaner shrimp, skunk shrimp. Those are probably off the table because wrasses think of them as dinner, and they're expensive. So you don't want to do that. I think I'd be leaning into more types of snails and urchins and starfish for a cleanup crew then. Because you already have some snails. So I'm talking about slugs. Cowries would be good. They should be able to hold their own against wrasses as long as they don't get flipped over. If they fall off the glass and they're like this, waiting with their little uh, their opening of their stony shell, the wrasse can hit that meat and they can, end up eating it for dinner. But cowries, conchs, Nassarius snails, and then different types of urchins. I like the tuxedo urchins. Matter of fact, there's, I think, 8 in my tank right now. I think one's going to go into Caitlin's tank because it needs one. Oh, thank you very much. Recif says to fight cyanoidose phytoplankton, the Steniochus type. And yeah, I've heard of that in the past where people have used phyto as a way to fight cyano. Yeah, I've heard of that. Forgot about it, so thanks for reminding me. LS10 says, what test would you use to monitor potassium? I would use Salivert. I have the Faunamarin test kit, and it's a little hard to read. I tried ELOS. I felt like that was even harder. And then the ICP test also, which I did 2 weeks ago, told me what my number was. So I have, different ways of knowing the numbers. Born to be a Shooter says, what are your thoughts on raising nitrate and phosphate without directly dosing it? I don't want to because it's only a 28 gallon. I don't want to accidentally shock the system by overdosing. Feeding is usually the way. Tank maturity is usually the way. As you're feeding the fish and they're peeing and pooping into the water, it's building up. It becomes more and more nutrients in the system over time. And if you're not doing a lot of water changes, it definitely will rise. Eventually, it'll rise to the point where there's too much. I would say if you had crushed coral instead of sand, you'll definitely have nitrate. So if you want to put crushed coral down there, you could definitely create a nitrate sink down there. But dosing is not a dangerous thing, and you can use a small bottle of Brightwell. I sell the small bottle of Neophos and Neo Nitro, and those can be dosed, and you can determine when you're going to put it in and how much, and you add that amount to the tank, and then boom, you've got your numbers up a little bit, and just stop dosing when you've hit that desired level. It's not something you have to keep dosing the rest of your life. You're doing it. When I was dealing with lowering my nitrate, they kind of ran away from me and they were really going away. And I ended up, and people were laughing at me because I joked. I said, I'll never have to dose nitrate. And during that exact moment, I mean, my nitrates had gone from like 80 for forever. They were down to 10 and heading south. They were going, and I literally dosed some Neo Nitro, I think 2 or 3 days just to bring it back up to 20 and keep it there so it wouldn't get away. And I removed, I had these, it's called Nitrate R, which I told them they named it wrong. It should have been called D-nitrator, like a big old capital D. Give it the D, right? D-nitrator, because it works. It works really well, and it just like sucked out my system. I was like, oh my God, and I removed the reactor and stop, and I dosed some. And that's why I said people were laughing, like, you actually dosed nitrate. You never thought you'd do that. But I did for a couple of days. Hen Roth says, will I have any problems from using coral epoxy? Depends on the size of the tank and how much epoxy you're going to use. I usually recommend that you only do a few things at a time. So like today, you want to secure 2 or 3 frags. You would do 2 or 3 and stop because your protein skimmer will overreact. It will start overflowing. It's a lot of chemical in the water. You'll see some corals close up. If you're using it to secure rock together, again, if there's no livestock, you can use as much as you want. But if you've got a tank that's running and you've got livestock involved, then I would say do a little bit at a time each day or every other day until you completed this task. You don't have to do it all in the same day. And that way you're not using like an entire bar of putty in one day. You use a couple pieces the size of a dice and you do that. And then, a few days you do it again, and a few days you do it again. Also, wear rubber gloves when you're using the putty, because as you're mixing and kneading it to get it in uniform and color, it's actually going through the flesh of your palm and into your bloodstream. And I know specifically of one person that went to the ER. Granted, he'd been doing it for a super long time, but he actually got to the point where he can never work with that putty without wearing rubber gloves. So I'm saying to wear the rubber gloves. Number one, your hands will stay cleaner because the putty does have a color in it. And so you put on the gloves, you mix it up, you knead it, you work in the tank, and then you're done. You peel them off, and your hands are cleaner. Then you can go wash them with soap and water because you're done. But don't let it get you to the point where you have to be taken by ambulance to the hospital with a anaphylactic shock situation. Paul says, I'm not happy with my aquascape. I've tried to rearrange it several times, but just can't get it to look right. Paul, do you have a girlfriend, a wife, a daughter? Because for some reason, women are really good at this. And you could ask them to help you, and they will literally transform your tank into something pretty. And then keep in mind, even after you've got the rocks better, they'll look even better when they're covered in coral. You just have to survive that period where you're looking at rock for a long time. Variant says, if your angelfish decided to nip at your corals, your SPS, reducing polyp extension, and eat away at your LPS, what would you do? Evict the fish or forget the corals? Great question. Very good question. The idea is, from everything I've read about this fish, that they don't go after corals. It is considered a reef-safe angelfish, but if it's not getting enough food, then it will resort to going after LPS corals and could go at some polyps on the SPS. So I think any fish could nip at something, and it may not even be like going after that. It might be going after something on the coral that we don't see. If you've ever tried to watch a mandarin eat, you're like, what did it eat? You're watching it, and it's got its eyes going, and it's kind of hovering like a helicopter over the spot, and it goes, pow! And you're like, what did it get? I never saw anything, but the mandarin did. Same thing. So would I evict it? No. Would I give up the coral? Probably. I mean, there are other corals in the sea. So if there's other corals that do well, and there's this, like, let's say this one just loves bird's nest, and I can never keep bird's nest again, I was just like, okay, no bird's nest. I can put bird's nest in Caitlin's tank. I got a choice, you know, or I could do something in the lower section of the anemone cube, maybe, or I put something in the frag tank, make myself happy. So there's some choices, but I would not evict the fish necessarily. I'm going to start off the fish in the small tank, but the plan is to put it in the main reef to enjoy it for many years to come. Josh says, I've removed all the medias, turned off. Is this an all-in-one tank, by the way? I can't remember. Says I turned off my scrubber, I've turned off my filtration, I've doubled my fish count, and still no improvement. It's starting to choke out a couple of my softies. Softies are tough. Softies can handle almost anything. Even if they don't look happy now, they could look fine in 5 days. I don't think you're going to watch your softies just struggle because there's a lack of filtration. The one thing you could do that won't affect nitrate or phosphate adversely is run carbon, because softies do exude stuff, and running carbon in a reactor to where water's flowing through the media, you'll see your softies actually perk up quite a bit. Solar powered reef, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to read it out loud. My skimmer overflowed and dumped 2 weeks worth of dark skimmate back into my tank. Oops. 2 days later, my phosphate went down from the usual 0.1 to 0.01. How was that possible? I have no idea. That makes no sense to me, but I wouldn't keep trying to do it. Yes, Paul, that is true. I've seen tuxedo urchins eat cyanobacteria. Also, I believe sea hares can eat cyanobacteria. A sea hare might work in a tank with wrasses if that answers the other person's question. But the sea hare has to be well fed and will starve to death in a tank without food. So if there's a tank that's just packed with hair algae, the sea hare can devour it, but you got to get it out of the tank before the algae's all gone, because the sea hare will starve. I don't even know if you could just like put a sheet of nori in there every day, if that would be enough to keep a sea hare alive long term. I'd have to find out from someone else. I don't know the answer. I do know a breeder, Matthew Wittenrich. He actually had a tank full of sea hares. So I should ask him what he was using to feed those to keep them alive. That would be interesting. Ahmed says, I use live sand and live salt water. Live salt water? For my tank. It's been 3 weeks now. Still no ammonia or nitrate. Can I put in some livestock? You could definitely do a fish and then continue to do your testing and see what happens. If you start to see an ammonia rise, then your tank will be cycling from the ammonia came from that. Because you put in some live stuff, but you didn't actually create a cycle. Is that correct? You literally just live sand and salt water, and that's that? Because the tank does need to have a cycle. Because once you put a fish in there and it starts peeing and releasing that ammonia into the water, that will start the whole cycle of ammonia converting to nitrite, converting to nitrate. And I don't think that you can just, if I'm understanding, I mean, you only shared a little bit. I don't have the backstory here. But if you just started a glass box and you put in live sand, and I don't know what live salt water is, but salt water from the ocean, that's still not enough. It needs to cycle. So no, don't put in a fish unless you want to use the fish for the cycle. Most of us don't do that these days. That was what we did back in the day. When I want to cycle a tank, I use raw shrimp. I go to the deli at the supermarket. I say, give me one of those big shrimp. You know, the one with the head, the legs, and the tail. They give me one dead one off the ice. I tell them to wrap it up. It costs me $1. I put it in the tank. I let it rot. And in 3 days, I take the corpse out and I throw it away, and there's a cycle. Other people will pour in liquid ammonia. Others will buy a kit like the Dry Rock Starter Kit from Brightwell that has a ammonia starter. There's other people who use Biospira, which I believe is a nitrifying bacteria that you can use to start a tank. That was something back in the 90s and 2000s. Might still exist today, to this day. Dr. Tim's might have something. There's a lot of different things on the market. But no, you can't just go live sand, ocean water, and then start dropping in fish. That won't work long term. Live rock 2, well, if you put the live rock in there, then you're doing basically what I'm doing. But you want to measure and you want to make sure that everything looks clean and healthy, the water's clear. And like I said, if you add some livestock, I would just add one thing and see how it does for weeks. And I'll test the water daily or even weekly minimum. Daily would be better. And just watch the numbers and see if anything happens. If nothing's happening and it seems to be good, you can add your second fish. You could add your first invert, your hermit crab or a few snails. And just take your time loading that tank up with livestock. Don't do anything in a hurry. Josh, okay, you ran carbon. Says there's no improvement. The green star polyps and the mushrooms seem to be the most affected. They'll be fine. Those are moody corals. They'll be fine. Mushrooms, they can shrivel down. Check your salinity. Double check that. And also check your tank temperature. If the tank is getting too hot during the daytime or getting too cold at night, those are things that can make soft corals kind of act a little pissy. But odds are it's not nitrate or phosphate that's affecting these softies, I don't think. And green star polyps can be closed for a week, 3 weeks, and then suddenly they open up again. If you want, you can take a soft toothbrush and you can brush off the green star polyps a little bit to clean the area around them, or take a turkey baster and blow them off. Maybe you'll see some results from that. HTC says, can you make a rose bubble tip extend its tentacles? Mine have short tentacles. I don't have a solution for you. Mine are all long tentacle. Some people have said it's because I have a lot of flow in my anemone cube. I don't think it's that much flow, but all my anemones tend to have long tentacles, and I don't know why. Ahmed says, what kind of media filter would I use during the cycle? Nothing. The cycle, you don't put anything in the system. You don't run the lights. You don't run carbon. You don't do water changes. You just let it go through the cycle. It just cooks itself, and it takes 2-3 weeks to go through the process. And usually, like I said, you'll see the ammonia rise and then collapse. The nitrate will rise really fast and come down really fast. And the nitrate will rise, and then it'll come down to about 20. And then if you want, you can do a water change, and that's ready for your first piece of livestock. And then LS10 Works says, what are your thoughts on adding more fish to up your nitrate rather than dosing? Obviously, dosing is more controlled, but who doesn't love more fish? It seems like low nitrate is the hard thing to come by these days. I know, it's weird, right? Back in the day, we were all wishing we could get zero nitrate, and now every tank has no nitrate. You can have more fish, and you're feeding more fish. It should definitely raise your nitrate and phosphate levels. Stepan says, how about live rock, live sand, ocean water, filter starter, water from an old tank? Yes, to all of that. You could do all of that. And that would definitely get a tank started. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here. We've been talking almost 2 hours. I want to remind you, today's Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water. We've been talking about testing quite a bit, but specifically we want to check everything our reef needs. That's going to be alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, salinity, temperature, potassium. If you want, send in an ICP test if your tank's doing great, so you can kind of see what all those numbers are when your tank is doing great. That way, when something's going on wrong later and you do another ICP test, you can compare them, and you can say, aha, so my tank did better when this number was here. So I would recommend that. I do sell ICP tests on my website. You can get those, and they go to icpanalysis.com. That's the company I choose to use. And the bottom line is that if you're testing your water, you're saving lives. Caitlin said, water tests save lives. And I need to put that on a shirt. It's so true. And it's such a good reminder. And we love our tank. We love what's in our tank, and we want it to do well. And the best way for it to do well is to know what the numbers are. Doesn't mean you have to overreact and do something, but at least knowing what the numbers are, when you look at the tank, your brain says, well, I know my numbers. I checked them yesterday. And it's not just hope and prayer. It's literally you have some information. And if you're looking at things and something seems a little bit off, you say, well, granted, my iron's low. Maybe if I start dosing iron, and you could start mulling it over and doing research on it. You're like, okay, I'm going to buy iron from Brightwell, or I'm going to get this from Aquaforest, or whatever brand it is you want to do. So don't skip your testing. Don't skip your testing. It's so important. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in this week, and I will see you again next week. I hope you have a great weekend, and I look forward to releasing some videos this week onto my YouTube channel that you can enjoy about the new tank and about the new fish, and one other video that's been